Everyone keeps saying Windwalker Monk is broken right now. So why does literally nobody want to play one? Because on paper, Windwalker looks insane. The logs are huge, the AoE damage is absurd, and mechanically, this might genuinely be one of the most fun specs Blizzard has ever designed. Everything flows, the rotation never feels slow, you're constantly chaining abilities together, constantly making decisions, and when the spec clicks, it feels amazing. But the second you start pushing real content, the cracks start showing. Because a lot of Windwalker's damage is fake, or more specifically, padding. Yeah, the logs look incredible, because Windwalker absolutely destroys ad packs, but progression bosses aren't killed by padding random mobs. They're killed by boss damage. And that's where Windwalker starts falling apart. Right now, Windwalker's single target damage doesn't justify bringing one over melee specs. Especially when classes like Unholy DK are doing comparable AoE damage while completely smoking us on priority damage. And the deeper you compare specs, the worse it gets. Windwalker doesn't bring lust, our raid utility isn't anything special, and honestly, our survivability feels mediocre compared to modern melee classes. So once the big numbers stop being meaningful, what exactly are we bringing? That's why Windwalker feels so weird right now, because Blizzard designed the spec around this hyper-specialized AoE identity without actually making us the best at it. And honestly, that sucks, because mechanically, Windwalker is incredible. The spec is fast and fluid, and the stuff removed in Midnight like Storm, Earth, and Fire was probably even the right call, because that ability had been being held together by duct tape for years. But none of that matters if the spec feels worse to bring in actual progression content. And don't even get me started on hero talents, because Blizzard added 2 just so everyone could pick Shadowpan. Raid, Shadowpan. Mythic Plus, Shadowpan. Everything, Shadowpan. The issue with Conduit is it does such a lackluster amount of your damage, and that's the frustrating part. Here we'll take a little look at some of the damage logs, just to give a representation of what I'm talking about when I say their damage is high on the log, but whenever you actually look at the important damage, which is the boss damage, it's pretty low and lackluster. So this is overall for all the raid with all of the damage being done. Windwalker falls pretty high. I mean, we're near the middle of the pack, if not closer to the top. Whenever we actually code up damage to bosses, I mean, we're bottom 4. But if you compare this to another class, like right now, Frost Death Knight seems to be performing pretty well. They're number 1 in overall, and number 1 in boss damage, which is the important metric. A good example of what I mean by bloated damage is on the first boss, Imperator. I mean, look at where Windwalker Monk falls. Right up near the top. Until you go to damage to bosses, and we are in the bottom. There are some bosses that aren't as bad about this, like Lura. You're number 3 for overall damage, and whenever you go to damage to bosses, we fall a little more middle of the line. Or even, for example, we have this log here. If this is the top log that Windwalker Monks have right now, this is 100% parse, so this is considered perfect. 248,000 overall damage. Very good. Insane damage. But then whenever we go a little deeper and look at who's actually damaging, Veilgore, he did 72,000 too. It's pretty good. And then Ezerak, he did 38,000 too. So 100k DPS across the 2 bosses, which means the rest of his damage was coming from ads, which is just insane. And I feel like one of the bigger issues with Windwalker Monk is the fact that there is no diversity in your builds. You're always playing Shadowpan. The top 50 people in Mythic Plus are all playing Shadowpan. And it's because Celestia the Conduit is just so bad. Most Windwalker players aren't looking to become the best spec in the game. We don't need to dominate every damage meter. We don't need to be mandatory in every raid comp. We just want the spec to feel worth bringing. Because right now, Windwalker has this weird problem where it looks overpowered on paper, but in actual meaningful content, it rarely feels desirable. And that sucks, because mechanically, this might genuinely be one of the most fun specs Blizzard has ever created. The gameplay is incredible, the pacing is incredible, the class fantasy feels incredible, but none of that matters if players feel punished for bringing it to serious content. And until Blizzard figures out how to make Windwalker valuable outside of inflated AoE logs, it's probably going to stay exactly where it is now. A spec that everybody says is broken, but almost nobody actually wants to play.